Well, there's been confirmation now that Parliament has said it will include correspondence from magistrates in the next meeting of the Security and Justice Committee of Parliament. The Judicial Office Bearers Association of South Africa, largely representing magistrates, have said they may actually consider industrial action because they have not had a proper pay increase for several years. In particular, they say the Remuneration Commission has not made findings about what kind of increase they should have. Magistrate Neelan Karikan is the president of the Judicial Office Bearers Association of South Africa. Magistrate Karikan, good afternoon to you. What response have you had from Parliament to your demands?
Thank you so much, Stephen. Stephen, we did engage Newzroom Afrika earlier today, and we were privileged enough to receive an interview. And subsequent to the judicial officers raising the concerns that they have, and the fact that the IRC has not been performing in terms of their role and their duties, we were lucky enough, in fact, at about 1:30 today, subsequent to that meeting or that interview, we received correspondence from the National Assembly. In fact, the deputy chairperson had written to us as JOASA, and they've highlighted that they've acknowledged our grievance and our complaints regarding the implementation of the major review that has been promised for more than a decade. And they've currently placed this matter on the agenda of the Select Committee of Justice and Security. So that's currently being tabled in terms of their rules, or the Council Rule 118. So we are hoping that this matter is going to currently receive traction. It seems that they needed some type of motivation to actually move this matter forward. So clearly there's some type of movement that's happening with the role players and with Parliament itself. We are hoping that ultimately that select committee will put the necessary pressure and hold the Independent Remuneration Committee to account, and ultimately fast track through the presidency and subsequently through Parliament for the implementation of the cost of living adjustment, including the major review. So it seems that that's where we are at now. It seems quite positive, and at least the IRC will be obliged to perform and to adhere to the constitutional mandate. Because as it stands, you will notice we've already engaged different media houses, and clearly you could almost say we are in a constitutional crisis. The fact that the largest portion of the judiciary, in the form of the lower courts and the magistrates in particular, the fact that they are currently having to exercise their rights in this fashion, whether it's going through the court system and litigation, and that's where we are also at in terms of our sister organization, ARMSA, who is currently in the High Court engaging on the aspect of COLA. When you look at the reports that come through the Independent Remuneration Committee, you will clearly see that the reports are largely, and I don't like using that term, but largely irrational. The percentages that were suggested is actually shocking. They are so way below inflation that each year or year on year, the lower court judiciary in terms of remuneration has been diminished incrementally. And this has been happening for more than a decade. And that is one of the reasons that when you look at other legally qualified people with similar years of experience, whether in the private sector, whether in the prosecution, whether in legal aid or in the state attorney's office, those colleagues of ours who generally at a certain point in time, before we got dealing from the public servants, and we were made into public office bearers in order to join the judges and other public office bearers. What happened was our colleagues, when you look at the salary structure, we were always on a level appropriate in relation to them. And since the linkage, we have ended up obviously falling way behind, and the IRC has not in fact kept up to date to their mandate.
Magistrate Karikan, I appreciate the problem and the way that you've explained it. As I understand it, though, you're an essential service, so you can't go on strike. And these sort of threats of industrial action, aren't you making a threat that would really be illegal?
Stephen, we are currently in the process of getting a firm legal opinion through JOASA as to what exactly our rights are. Remember, some years ago, so almost a decade ago, magistrates did in fact pursue some form of industrial action. However, to an extent, it might not have been as organized and controlled and thought out as we are currently doing. It's not as if we want to engage in some form of industrial action or strike. Right now, we have already disseminated nationally, and we've got a footprint in every province as an organization. Our members are deliberating, and obviously, all our members are legally qualified. So they're going to express their minds effectively. As judicial officers, and particularly in the lower court, we don't have the benefit of the Labor Relations Act. We are not regarded as employees or public servants. We don't have much bargaining power. No one represents us. So we need to find a position or a solution as to where exactly do we go and who exactly represents our interests. Because remember, we've got the Magistrates Commission. We've got the Minister of Justice. We have our Chief Justice. We have the Independent Remuneration Committee. Unfortunately, cumulatively, none of the institutions or role players that I've just mentioned have taken any true or real interest in looking after the position of the magistracy. So
Magistrate, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't think I've ever interrupted a magistrate before, sir. I have heard you. The point is, though, you do have to do everything legally. And the other question, of course, is, you know, Parliament's about to end for an election, and I realise you've got to go through certain channels, and I don't dispute you doing that. I just don't know if Parliament can really help you at this stage.
You know what, Stephen, we have to do what's necessary. I know there's going to be potentially a change of the constitution of the Parliament in terms of who's going to actually be there. And it's unfortunate that the different houses and the different committees that were supposed to do their job did not do their job. Remember, for 2023, last year, as of the 1st of April, magistrates were already entitled to an increase. Other public servants have already received it. And we've already now, for the second year, from the 1st of April 2024, there is a entitlement to another cost of living adjustment. That has not even been done. So you must appreciate that we're already 1 year behind. And when ultimately we do get what we're supposed to get, there's no talk of any interest on the amounts that we receive. And even previously, we did not receive an increment for at least 2 years. So which means magistrates must, I don't know how they're supposed to really deal with inflation and the cost of living adjustments that need to happen. But what they end up doing is they end up having to go into debt. And once they get into debt, then they subsequently receive a lump sum for a whole year's back pay without any interest or anything of the sort. But then it's too late. You know, the day-to-day living expenditure of a magistrate, you know, magistrates really cannot make it. It just doesn't make sense, because if we remained as prosecutors, we would have been earning much more. And remember, being a magistrate, if I move from a prosecutor to a magistrate, it's quite a prestigious position. You know, people look up to magistrates. And the prosecutors that are currently within our system, they regret being there because they actually are earning much less than what they would have earned had they remained as prosecutors. So the anomaly is very clear. And just by doing a little bit of introspection, or just by delving a little bit into the position of the magistracy, you'll be able to appreciate it's almost as if there ought to be a commission of inquiry of sorts that looks into the judiciary in total, but in specifics in respect of the magistracy. And when that type of engagement happens, there will be a realization that there has not been sufficient changes to our legislation. And, you know, when you look at our constitution, the Minister of Justice was already supposed to fast-track implementation in terms of legislation to create a single judiciary. That doesn't even exist. So each of these aspects are interrelated, Stephen.
Magistrate Neelan Karikan, thank you, President of the Judicial Office Bearers Association of South Africa.